The fluorescent lights of Patterson Hardware hummed their eternal song overhead as Marcus Donovan ran his calloused palm along a 2x4, checking for warp the way his father had taught him 30 years ago. The grain told stories if you knew how to listen. This one straight and true, perfect for the platform he had been building since June. Sawdust clung to his Carhartt work pants, the kind of honest dirt that came from actual labor, not a corporate desk. Emma tugged his sleeve. 8 years of boundless energy packed into 60 pounds of auburn-haired determination. Her mother's coloring, his stubborn chin. "Dad, I found the purple paint. Can we use it for the trim?" Marcus glanced at his daughter, fighting the smile that always won when she lit up like this. The treehouse had been their project since spring, something to fill the silence that still echoed through rooms where Sarah's laughter used to live. 2 years since cancer took her. 730 days of learning to be both parents at once. Purple might clash with the cedar, kiddo, but we'll take a look. Emma bounced toward the paint aisle, her sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. Marcus turned back to his measurements, pencil behind his ear, the phoenix tattoo on his left wrist catching afternoon light through the high windows. He tugged his sleeve down out of habit. Some marks weren't meant for casual explanation, especially not to third graders asking uncomfortable questions at school. The design had been sketched on a coffee shop napkin when he was 26 and stupid enough to believe matching tattoos meant forever. Victoria's idea, two phoenixes learning to fly together. Wings spread despite the breaks. They'd gotten them inked the same day, drunk on cheap wine and cheaper promises about conquering distance and ambition. Then she'd left for New York with a gallery position she couldn't refuse and assurances that dissolved like sugar in rain. 3 weeks later, she'd stopped answering calls, blocked his number, vanished so completely it was like she'd never existed beyond the mark on his skin. Marcus had done what people do. He'd grieved, moved on, met Sarah at a woodworking exhibition where she'd spent 3 hours asking intelligent questions about dovetail joints. She'd been steady where Victoria was storm, present where Victoria was always half gone. They'd built something real, a daughter, a home, 6 years of the kind of love that didn't need dramatics to prove itself. The memory of Sarah's last months still cut deep. The way she'd refused bitterness even when her body betrayed her. How she'd made him promise to keep living after she was gone. To not let grief turn him into a ghost haunting his own house. He'd kept that promise mostly. Got up every morning, fed Emma, ran the shop. Built things with his hands because that's what Donovan men did. They made something useful from raw materials. Something that lasted. Marcus marked the board with a carpenter's pencil, muscle memory guiding the line straight and true. The hardware store's familiar smells wrapped around him. Fresh lumber, motor oil, the metallic tang of new tools. Safe territory, predictable. A small voice cut through the ambient noise of shopping carts and overhead announcements. Clear and curious in a way that made the back of his neck prickle. "Excuse me, sir. My mother has a tattoo just like yours." The world narrowed to a pinpoint. The pencil slipped from Marcus's fingers. The box of deck screws he'd been holding hit the floor, ball bearings scattering across concrete in a sound like his thoughts breaking apart. He turned slowly, the way you move when you're not sure you want to see what's behind you. A girl stood 3 feet away, maybe 9 years old, in a navy dress with a white Peter Pan collar that screamed private school and trust funds. Patent leather shoes caught the fluorescent light. A velvet headband held back dark curls that escaped in careful disarray, the kind of styled imperfection that cost money to achieve. But her eyes, God, her eyes were the exact shape as the ones he shaved past every morning. Not the color, hers were brown where his were hazel, but the architecture underneath. The way they tilted slightly at the outer corners, the directness of her gaze, like she'd already decided he was safe enough to approach. She pointed at his wrist where his sleeve had ridden up during the motion of turning. Her finger, small and precise, aimed directly at the phoenix, the bird with the broken wing that learned to fly. My mother has the same one on her shoulder. She never shows anyone, but I saw it once when she was changing. She told me it was from a long time ago, from someone important. Marcus's brain scrambled to process the impossible. The tattoo wasn't from any shop pattern book. It was original, drawn by 2 people who thought they were building something permanent. Only 2 existed in the world. his and hers. The girl tilted her head, waiting for a response he couldn't form. She had the careful posture of a mom when taught that presentation mattered. Shoulders back, chin level. But underneath the polish, something vulnerable leaked through, the universal look of childhood loneliness that transcended tax brackets. Emma appeared at his elbow, curiosity overriding stranger danger. "Hi, I'm Emma. That's a really pretty dress. Do you go to St. Catherine's?" The girl's attention shifted, her formal composure cracking slightly. "I'm Lily. I go to Riverside Academy. We don't have recess anymore. They call it structured outdoor time." Emma wrinkled her nose. "That sounds boring. We have actual recess, with swings and everything." Someone dropped a paint can 3 aisles over, the clatter sharp in the Cathedral of Commerce and weekend projects. Marcus felt time slow down in that peculiar way it does before everything changes. Like the moment between lightning and thunder, when you know the strike is coming, but haven't felt it yet. Footsteps approached, rapid and urgent. Expensive heels clicked in unmistakable rhythm against linoleum. Sharp, precise, the sound of someone who'd learned to move with purpose through rooms full of people who measured worth in zeros. "Lily, where did you—" The voice cut off mid-sentence. Marcus knew it before he turned. Some sounds burrow into your bones and wait there dormant until circumstance resurrects them. He'd spent a decade bearing this particular frequency, and now it rose from the grave fully formed, dragging every memory he'd thought safely dead. He turned slowly, each degree of rotation an exercise in controlled demolition. 10 years had refined Victoria's sharp edges into something almost dangerous. The ratty art student with paint-stained fingers had become a woman in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his truck's last service. Her dark hair, once long enough to tangle in his fingers, was cut in a severe bob that framed cheekbones he traced with reverent hands in a different lifetime. But her eyes hadn't changed. Still that particular shade of gray that reminded him of October skies before rain, the kind of weather that made you want to stay inside with someone warm. Right now, those eyes were wide with something between recognition and terror, trapped in the moment where past and present collided with the force of inevitability. Marcus. His name left her lips like a confession, like a curse, like the final word of a prayer she'd been reciting for a decade without knowing how it ended. Victoria. Tasting her name after 10 years of not speaking it felt like touching a scar that had never properly healed. The air between them turned thick and hard to breathe, charged with everything they'd done to each other in the name of love and self-preservation. Emma pressed closer to his side, confused by the tension she could sense but not name. Lily looked between them, her small face creased with the kind of worry children get when they sense adult complications beyond their comprehension. Victoria recovered first, features smoothing into a mask of polite distance that probably served her well in boardrooms and charity galas. "I apologize. Lily, we need to leave now." But Lily was looking at the tattoo again, then at her mother, then back to Marcus, with the dawning wonder of a child piecing together a puzzle adults thought they'd hidden. "Is he the one from your story? The one about the phoenix who found another phoenix and they learned to fly together before the storm came?" Victoria's face went pale under her expensive foundation. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a structural failure he couldn't name. What story? But Victoria was already taking Lily's hand, already turning toward the exit with the desperate grace of someone fleeing a crime scene. "I'm sorry, we have to go. I'm sorry." She moved toward the door, pulling Lily along, but the girl looked back over her shoulder. Marcus saw it clearly now in the afternoon light. The shape of her nose was his, the way her eyebrows arched when she was curious. The stubborn set of her jaw that he recognized from every mirror he'd ever faced. Emma's voice was small beside him. "Dad, who was that lady? Why did she run away?" Marcus couldn't answer. He was too busy calculating months, counting backward, remembering the last night he'd spent with Victoria before she disappeared. The hotel room neither of them could really afford. Rain against windows. Promises they'd made about calling, about making it work despite the distance, about love being enough. 9 months. Lily was 9 years old. The math was simple. The implications were apocalyptic. Marcus moved through the next 3 days in a fog thick enough to drown in. His hands performed familiar tasks, measuring, cutting, sanding, while his mind spun in useless circles that led nowhere but back to that moment in the hardware store. The way Victoria had looked at him, not with the hatred of an ex-lover or the indifference of true distance, but with something that looked remarkably like grief, mixed with fear. And Lily, sweet, careful Lily with her private school posture and her mother's eyes and his jawline, asking about Phoenix's learning to fly. The custom cabinet project he'd promised for the Henderson renovation kept defeating him. Measurements he could normally make in his sleep came out wrong twice, then 3 times. Dave, his 60-year-old shop assistant, who'd worked with Marcus's father before him, finally set down his router and crossed his arms. "You gonna tell me what's eating you, or we gonna keep wasting good walnut until you get your head straight?" Marcus stared at the board he'd just cut a 1/4 inch short. In 15 years of professional woodworking, he'd never made such a careless mistake. "Just tired." Dave's expression said he didn't believe it for a second, but he'd been around enough to know when to push and when to let a man work through his own demons. Tired doesn't make you measure twice and cut wrong. But it's your call. The problem was the not knowing. If Lily was his daughter and every cell in his body screamed that she was, why had Victoria kept it secret? Why disappear completely instead of telling him? He'd loved her once, loved her with the kind of intensity that feels like drowning and flying simultaneously. When she left for that prestigious position, he'd offered to follow. She'd said no, said his life was here, his family's business was here. She couldn't ask him to abandon roots that ran 3 generations deep. 3 weeks later, the silence, complete and absolute, like she'd been erased from existence. He'd grieved, he'd moved on. He'd met Sarah and built something real, something that lasted until cancer decided 6 years was enough. Now this, Monday night found him alone in the workshop after Emma had gone to bed, sitting on the floor with an unfinished drawer in his lap, and tears he hadn't realized he was crying, sliding down his face. The smell of cedar and old varnish wrapped around him, familiar as breathing. The door creaked. Emma stood in her pajamas, 8 years old and already wise enough to know when silence was the only gift that mattered. She climbed into his lap without asking, fitting herself against his chest the way she had since she was small enough to cradle in one arm. They sat like that for a long time, his arms around his daughter, while the weight of another daughter, a daughter he'd never known existed, pressed down on him with the force of lost years and stolen moments. Finally, Emma spoke. "I like that girl, Lily. She seemed lonely." Marcus's throat was too tight for words. He just nodded against her hair. "Do you think we'll see her again?" The question hung in the air between hope and heartbreak. "I don't know, baby." Emma leaned back to look at him, her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, serious in a way that made her look older than 8. "I hope so. I've always wanted a sister." The words hit him like a physical blow. He had to close his eyes against the surge of emotion, against the impossible truth that Emma couldn't know but somehow sensed anyway. Children had a way of seeing what adults tried to hide, and Emma had always been particularly perceptive. "Life doesn't always give us what we want, kiddo." Emma settled back against his chest, her voice thoughtful in the darkness. "Mommy used to say that sometimes life gives us what we need instead, but we have to be brave enough to see it." Marcus held his daughter tighter, Sarah's wisdom coming back through Emma's voice like a message from beyond the grave. Maybe his late wife had known something he didn't. Maybe she'd known all along that the past never stays buried, no matter how deep you dig. The discovery came accidentally on Saturday morning. Marcus was at the farmer's market with Emma, buying heirloom tomatoes for the sauce Sarah had taught him to make. The one recipe he'd managed to master after her death because it felt like keeping a piece of her alive. Emma examined the vegetables with the seriousness of a professional chef, which made the vendor smile. She'd inherited her mother's attention to detail, the ability to spot quality that most people missed. "Dad, how do you know which ones are ripe?" Marcus picked up a Cherokee purple, feeling its weight, checking the give near the stem. "You look for even color, no soft spots. Feel the weight, should be heavy for its size. And smell here, near the top. Should smell like summer, like earth and sunshine." Emma pressed her nose to a tomato and grinned. "It does smell like summer." Marcus ruffled her hair, grateful for these simple moments that felt almost normal. Then he saw her, Victoria in jeans and a simple white shirt that